Okay. All right. Are you ready, Victoria? You okay?
Well, we can't tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it next to it, like, I don't know, it's You're just talking to Finn and I. Yeah.
Yeah, just.
Yeah. Yours is here. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
You just be making faces like.
All right, folks, I have 4 o'clock, so we'll get the show on the road. Thank you so much for coming out today. So these are the candidacy presentations for Victoria and Staj, as you see on the screen. As we get started, I would just first of all like to give a big thanks to Greg. As everyone knows, the presentations today are in support of the Candidacy exhibition that's up in Appendache, and Greg was instrumental in helping us make that happen and in helping to install. So if we could give Greg a big. If you have not had a chance yet to see that exhibition, it will be up until early May 10, right on the screen. And it's up on the 5th floor of the Appendache building, and the works are spread throughout the lobby area and other areas, so you can just mosey around and take them in. So the candidacy presentations today then will be in support of that work, and I've asked both Staj and Victoria to share about their artistic influences and inspiration, their process and techniques and material choices, and certainly about their conceptual ideas within the work. So Victoria will go first, and then Staj after, and we'll have time for questions, comments, and things of that nature on the end. So without any further ado, it's yours, Victoria. And you can just use the.
Hi, I am Victoria Elizabeth. To get started, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background. So I grew up in a really large family and we moved around a lot, but we spent most of our time in Colorado, in a small town about 12 miles away from the Continental Divide. Living there really influenced me. I had a very unfiltered view of wildlife. Saw everything from raccoons, deers, moose, to mountain lions and bears. And it really impacted on how I see the world. When I was in school, I went to a very, very small charter school with only about 100 students. It was very community-based. So much so that instead of having a 5-day week, it was 4 days and 1 day where instead of like doing classes, we would go out into the community and do things around the community, from like taking water samples to cleaning up. Yeah. So this is just a fun little picture. I used to keep bees, and this is very impactful for me and my work. But ooh, oh, that's the microphone. Oh, oops. Ugh. But we're gonna get into my influences. We'll come back to the bees in a minute. So my influences in contemporary, I should have smacked that. My contemporary influences focus on ecology, materials, and space. So my first influence is Corey Tabayashi, then Courtney Matson, and Mark Dion. Their work consists of science and environmentalism. They research natural materials and how humans relate to nature, which is very similar to my work in that I look at how natural forms can exist inside built spaces And I'm interested in the tension that happens when something organic is placed inside something structured, like a building. I'm also a very big reader. Oh, I can flip through these. Oh, I got that out of order. Okay. I'm also a very big reader. Two of my literary influences that I will talk about endlessly and shove down everybody's throat a bazillion times over is The Poetics of Space by Gaston Bachelard, and Love Letters to the Earth by Thich Nhat Hanh. The Poetics of Space really changed how I think about environments. It focuses on everyday spaces like houses, rooms, corners, and how we experience them in a personal and emotional way. It's not just about architecture, but memory, imagination, and feeling. Yeah. And then Love Letters to the Earth is different, but it's very important. It's a short, reflective book about our relationship to the earth in a more personal and emotional way. One of the main ideas is that we're not separate from the earth, we are part of it. And even though it sounds simple, it really shifts how you think about everything. So in my work, I focus on small moments in nature people often overlook, like trout moving through water, plants reaching towards light, or bees building honeycomb. These moments show patterns and systems that exist without human control. I'm less interested in individual objects and more interested in systems and how things grow, spread, and connect. I often look at things like root system or mycelial networks for inspiration. I also like to think about thresholds, the spaces in between things, for example, between nature and architecture, between stability and instability. When I bring natural forms into a building, it creates a kind of tension. It feels like something is entering or taking over, and it raises questions about how different systems interact. For my process, I mainly work in ceramics, and I am obsessed with it. I'm really interested in the history of ceramics and how every culture has its own relationship to clay, from Asia to the Americas, Africa, everywhere. And ceramics acts as a record of human life and holds evidence of the daily routines, rituals, and survival, and it's an excellent marker of human history. There's something really powerful about that to me. Clay comes directly from the earth, and when you work with it, you're part of that long history. It holds memory, not just physically in how it reacts and changes, but culturally too. And at the same time, it has this unpredictability. It doesn't always do exactly what you want. It can shift, crack, respond in ways you didn't expect or plan. But that is something that I absolutely love about it. When I work with a material, I allow those imperfections to come through. My techniques for working are mostly hand building, adding layers and building forms so that they feel like they're growing. And for specific techniques, I actually veer away from most like expected art techniques, and I actually use a lot of baking techniques. My mom is an avid baker and she taught me a lot of things, so I pull from that. So much so that even now, when I get stuck on how to do something, I'll call my mom and talk it through like we're baking a cake. I really need to pace my slides better. These are some in-process images of me working. As you can see, I'm piping clay onto something. Then a weird angle of another one. Yeah. For when it comes to my displays, I think of installation as activating a space, not just placing objects in it. I don't really want my work to be sat on a pedestal. Instead, I want to create objects, and I do create objects that interact with walls, floors, and the way people move through a room. When forms spread across the wall, they interrupt the structure of the building. When they come up from the floor, they make the ground feel less stable. These choices can create subtle senses of discomfort, which make people more aware of their bodies and surroundings. When I decided to do the work for Apodaca that's so associated with science and data, I really wanted to push that idea of of control and create the tension of the overlapping systems. So when doing this project, I actually did research on what they are studying in Apodaca from the river systems. They look at trout populations, water levels, and salamanders. They have an incredible entomology program where they're looking at different pollinator species and how those affect the different plant life in the area. So instead of doing the actual insects, I did the plants that they're looking at in pollinators. Yeah. And then yeah, so about the bees, because I used to keep bees, I was very influenced. It was probably one of my first influences for the ideas of thinking about space and how we act with space. Because when I was learning about beekeeping years ago, I learned about the design of the Langstroth hive, developed by Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth. He discovered something called bee space, which is the very specific gap that bees won't fill with honey or propolis, which is what bee hives are made out of. It's about 1/3 of an, no, smaller. I'll look up the exact picture later. But they won't fill it, so that like really influenced how I thought about how we as humans interact with space. Yeah, so it's something I'm still exploring my work. And questions, please make them nice. How bad was that?
She's like, what you-
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Can you tell me more about some of the plants that you decided to choose? I know you said it was based off of the pollinators and what pollinators.
Yeah, so let me go back. So this one specifically, these little guys are called little brown jugs. And because they look like little brown jugs. And when I was doing my research, I met with one of the grad students there, and they were doing research on what specifically pollinates them because those little can you see the mouth on this? Yeah. These little things here are actually flowers, and they're very weird and wacky. And so that's like really what got me like, okay, I'm gonna do stuff with like the pollinators and like the plants that they're looking at. I was also looking at the dogwood because they have such an interesting structure for the pollen, like how they, yeah, how they not pollinate, how they, yeah, how they attract things and like their stamens.
I can't remember.
Yeah, so that was something that I found interesting, and that's why I was like looking at those. And I also wanted to focus mostly on plants found locally. So yeah. Elijah.
Very briefly, tensions between systems.
Mm-hmm.
We talk
Yeah, I think that's mostly the tension between the natural world, like nature as a system, and then humans as a system, and kind of pushing humans and nature. Yeah, just pushing that tension and like trying to do things. Yeah. Jennifer?
Can you speak about the decision to leave the herbarium images up and to place your works around that and the resulting dialogue?
Yeah, so the herbarium images are part of the permanent collection, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they are up in Apodaca, and I really wanted my work to have a conversation with things happening in the building, including things that are already there. So I decided to leave them up partially so that they'd have that, like, so they would have that dialogue between what's already there and what I'm putting in. Yeah. And with the plants that are on the wall, it kind of makes it feel like the 2D is becoming 3D, and it's kind of like merging that perspective. Stash.
I'm curious about the tension for you between being botanically, totally correct, and then being able to work with the clay, work with your imagination, and how you navigated that. And it was especially the ones that look like little baby ferns unfolding. And I was like, is that a baby fern or not? And I was like, oh, is Victoria allowing herself to have space to play? So just curious.
Absolutely. Play is very important. Also, when I had first started doing botanical things, I was very hung up on everything being so perfect and accurate, but doing that, it makes it look kind of cartoonish, and it kind of makes it unrealistic. So allowing things to be a little bit askew really helps you kind of like see it as more realistic. Cool, great, thanks. I'm gonna go throw up now.
Okay, hi everybody. My name's Staj. I think I know everyone here, so we'll just start in. So my practice is a lot about inner being and how to practice being part of multiple beings, being part of ecosystem, being part of communities, being both an individual and an interbeing. So I just want to start with the context. We're at the dawn of the sixth mass extinction. There's been 5 other mass extinctions in the past 540 million years. There's debate about it because a mass extinction is 75% of the known biota being extinct, and we're at about 40% of the known biota being extinct. So we're at the beginning. That's all happened in about 80 years. Climate change is just the icing on the cake. So I come into art with holding that inside myself. Because I believe that the extinctions are not just external, they're not just in the species outside of humans. I think something's gone extinct inside of us. And I don't think we know what we've lost. But I think artists and poets do. And I've been inspired to follow the artistic path and to stay alive and to keep believing in humans because of artists. So William Bartram was a naturalist who was doing his work right at the dawn of the American Revolution. And he was scorned by scientists in Europe because he wasn't using proper perspective. And he knew about distance and how to use perspective and scale, but he also knew about ecological connections. He knew about trophic cascades. He knew that the subjective view of someone who's been sitting and observing an ecosystem for days, weeks, months, years, they're going to be placing certain things larger than other things when they're telling a narrative of an ecosystem. So I really appreciate how he centered subjectivity within science and art, which is a powerful move and a very rare move. Hilma af Klint, also born at a pivotal moment in time when electricity was being discovered and used, and there was kind of a push away from the Enlightenment being so great that we could kind of push off the dogma of the church and understand the world better, but also this focus on materialism. And so as electricity was starting to be used, there became a wonder within society at large by scientists and artists, lots of people, of what can we not see? So Helma af Klint was kind of going into what can we not see and communicating with the unseen, and her art is about those communication patterns. John Arp, who Kevin recently turned me on to, he was a Dadaist and critiquing society through art, and then shifted into these biomorphic forms where art becomes more about healing and writing about humans and nature, and how do we become more part of nature? How do we become more part of ecosystems? Kanupa Hanska Lugar is also a strong influence for me. He is a native artist, and this particular action art movement installation was at Standing Rock, and different native nations around the country built these mirrors on cardboard, and then folks there stood and they showed those mirrors to the paramilitary forces and the National Guard that were holding machine guns and pointing it at them, so that those military people could see that they were human. They could drop the military role and remember the common humanity. Elizabeth Porritt Carrington, she's one of my mentors. She's here in Asheville. She works a lot with the beingness of place, with the beingness of a leaf, of wind, of sunlight. And she's taught me so much of how to allow that to come in through me, to kind of let go of the scientific mind and observe with a little bit more imagination. Becky Little, she's of Scotland. She works with Cobb, and influence as a natural builder, going in and seeing the earth itself as art. Rebecca Gilling, another influence, she's a mentor. She does these giant cob is mud and fiber, and she does these giant sculptures, usually at music festivals. And Andy Goldsworthy, of course, who is able to elevate ephemeral art. And then Helen Frankenthaler, who I've recently been turned on to by Ron, who's been a huge influence in my paintings. Just a freedom of movement and an upholding of color itself. And what an amazing, yeah, there's just her freedom there. I admire. So when I came into Western, I came here because I had noticed that my art was engaging in these conversations with landscapes, and they were pretty powerful conversations. The one on the left was this conversation about how our bodies are not just our bodies go into the ecosystem. And then the one on the right, I was in abandoned coal fields, strip mine area in Ohio, and the paintings just started became this conversation about how the ground, the dirt beneath us, that there are galaxies there, worlds. So we look up at the sky and at the stars and think it's so vast, and there's so much out there, and there's so much life out there potentially. And roots underground have something similar going on, but the amount of galaxies around every little rootlet, the rhizosphere on every vascular plant's roots, just wild that's entire spans of life. Coming from these photosynthetes, these little pockets of sunshine that are coming out of the roots into the soil, and then this entire community of life around that. So I was like, how do I expand this? Because this is like, I didn't think of those things. Those things like came through as I was painting them. And these were just like 2-hour plein air paintings. It was just like, boop, 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 boop. So I wanted to get guidance, because it was like, something's here. Something here is really special, and I want to learn how to lean into this. So when I came, I started working with printmaking, because that felt like the natural first thing to continue to work with, because I can share the prints, I can involve words. So Tatiana guided me a lot, kind of helped me kind of push against my flatness. And I also worked with painting. I continued to be more abstract, but just grappling with a lot of aspects of how do I work with color, and how do we work with the ideas of meeting collective needs and individual needs, and how do we meet both of them at the same time for that sweet spot in the middle. mutual aid, again on birch panels, working with synthetic oil paints. And then this was on canvas. This was with acrylic, gesso, industrial oil paints. There was some soil pigments in here, but the kind of taking my world under, looking at lichens under the microscope, and these flat landscapes that were so expansive, that are so expansive, and being able to actually see them magnified, and the neurons in the sky, trying to relay in the neurons in the landscape, and trying to just lean into how do we see the world around us as breathing? We've been trained to see the world around us as objects. Is there a way to see the world around us as fully alive? Can I lean into that with my art? Can I make that a meditation to help myself shift gears and just at least hold that? But I started hitting some blocks last spring semester, and I wasn't sure what I was doing. Mental blocks, psychological blocks, body blocks. And Susan was like, Stash, you got to go to your roots. So I was like, what does going to my roots mean? So I go to my roots, but it gets a little confusing. So my roots are that I was early on studying consciousness and cognitive science, because as an early person in my teenage years, I thought there's something that, based upon what people believed, it made it where they couldn't see things that other people who believed certain things could see. That led into political science and journalism, and believing that our stories are the things that make us see things or not see things. And from there, being a protest kid, an anti-war kid in the early 2000s, I got really disillusioned, and I felt like I needed to leave. I needed to leave this dominator culture and this dominator economic system. I need to see if there's another way outside of it. So hopped on freight trains down here to the Southern Appalachians, lived with two friends with a backpack, a tarp, a hatchet, cast iron pan, no tech, not even a headlamp. We had candles, 50 pounds of field guides, and we walked between Georgia and Tennessee, and then back down again, up and down, till we got kicked out of the Nastassja National Forest. Banned from there, went west, and yes, we started a little like eco-stead in northern Idaho with no running water, no electricity, and no chainsaws either. So that was my 20s. In my 30s, I wanted to give back to the forest. And so I became a lichenologist and was on these landscapes. So it was like, okay, so how do I bring that into art? And at the core, there's an emphasis on materials. There's an emphasis on being in the forest and getting my materials locally. But one of the things I had to do is remind myself that scorn and shame are not effective social change techniques whatsoever. So I had to allow myself to still be using industrial pigments and not scorn myself for that. That the reason that I want to be working with these natural materials is because I want to hear what they have to say. I want them to be part of the conversation. So my partner and I already chainsaw mill our own lumber. I'm more of support and hoping that he doesn't die up there, and then planing and jointing. But working with wood's great, but I'm not very good at making things that are functional. So I started working with mud and fiber and cob, and making my own charcoal out of deadfall wild grape, and gathering soils and sifting them in soil sifters to make oil paints. And then most recently working with lake pigments, which is an alchemical process from the Middle Ages, where you take botanical pigments and then you can precipitate them out with a mordant, and thus be able to get the powder you can use for oil paint. But one of my biggest roots was that I wanted my life and I wanted what I was doing as a scientist to be an offering of gratitude. And as a scientist, I was writing reports and I was naming things. And there had to be a different way of giving back. So I want to make art that can decompose into the ground. I want to be able to bury it in the ground. I want to be reminded that I want my being to be an offering to the earth and to the ecosystems and to my friends and my community. I want to be in that space while still remembering I'm an individual with my own needs too. So these beings started coming out, how Pinocchio transformed from a puppet into a real boy. This pond being, so I'm working a lot with roots. I really think roots are important, and Susan also talked about roots. And then this very ephemeral piece that happened in Colorado, I'd gone down to a beaver pond and I started to dig and make this little offering being. And in my first dig with my bare hands, I found this fork. So which made the digging for the rest of it much, much easier, which was just perfect. And just little magic pieces like that. So she's the first one that's actually gotten to decompose in the ground. More little offering bowls. And then rhododendron just scrambled together, no tools whatsoever, bare hands on dead rhododendrons. And then more little offering cups of cob. And I just find it amazing that there can be so much energy and power in a piece that was assembled so very quickly and in a fury. And then it's holding together so beautifully. Susan Martin also said, I see you going big. So I went big. I started a wolf goddess on Friends Land, community land project by Black Mountain that got destroyed by Helene. The house got destroyed. They started rebuilding another house you can see in the background. And they wanted to put something there to honor Helene, to honor the land, and to bring some protection. And they wanted a wolf goddess's head. So I leaned into an abstract form, started working with bamboo and jute twine. And the bamboo is just right down the road, invasive bamboo, and then the clayey mud from their place. I did import sand from Lowe's, but that's relatively local. The next one was continuing with bamboo and seeing if I could make a big cob sphere. But one of the big problems with cob is it's really heavy, even when it's dried. And I didn't really anticipate how heavy it was, nor how hard it would be to keep it upright. So that's my next thing that I'm working on is how do I make things that aren't going to fall over? And if they do start to fall over, how can I be able to take them apart so that I can make it work again and then put them back together and not have it be so delicate for something that's so big. So one of the things was just take it off the pedestal. So this is another little spore ball, and he's been just like rolling around on the grass near my place. And I want to bring him up to Hemphill Bald and record him rolling around and pushed by the wind. He's made of bamboo and twigs. The cob sentinels, that's continuing the exploration with the cob on bamboo with modular bases using reclaimed 2x4s and beechwood. And the idea behind it is leaning into something called thin layer chromatography, which those are the plates up behind. And thin layer chromatography is a way where you can tell what chemicals are in the lichen, and you put the lichen's essence of sorts into a chemical, and then it pulls them out, and there's these bands of colors that go up. And the question that I've been holding is, are humans evil or good? You know, that question just seems to be just always asking. It's just like, it's the causes and conditions. It's the solutions that our society comes to that brings out good in us or brings out really evil in us. And what are those causes and conditions that can bring out care and kindness as opposed to hatred and scorn? How do we work towards those structures that will bring out care and kindness and connection? One of the things that I learned doing field work, like ecological field work, was the importance of ritual, which is not something that you expect to hear from a scientist. And I kept it very under wraps. I was very scared. of letting anyone know. But what I found was that at sites that I went to and I gave an offering, and I usually would give an offering of a pebble from another place in the Great Basin, and I would introduce myself and I'd say, hi, my name's Nastassja Noell. I am here to conduct a biodiversity inventory of all of you lichens that are here, because I want to be able to help management know about you and people know about you so that we can protect your ecosystem, be able to monitor the change. And, I just basically tell them what I was there to do. And those sites where I introduced myself and gave an offering, I would find at least twice as many species there. We're talking like a difference between 50 species and 120 species. It was wild. It was like I could actually see more. And that's me. That's my own personal experience. I don't know if that is for other people. So this winter, going into my next series of paintings, I decided I'm going to make an altar. I'll do the same thing. And every day I'll do a drawing, not for the paintings to come, but just for the altar, just to say, hey, there's this thing birthing, and I just want to just say, like, engage in a conversation. And what came out was this first painting. So this is my first painting without using an acrylic gesso, just rabbit skin glue, charcoal. Then I've made soil pigments as well as pastels, industrial pastels. And this, I had taken a picture of an area of a forest with all these wild grapevines. And I took a projector and I projected onto the canvas because I met someone at Miami Art Fair who was in Jennifer's booth, who would project these scenes that she would record of being down in the coral reefs. And then she would project them onto her canvas and then she'd paint them. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Like, you just get to be in that habitat that you love so much while you're like transcribing its forms and its movement. So this was that one. It felt like it might be too cognitive. Sorry for the crappy picture, but I felt like it was too cognitive, and like, can I lean into not being so cognitive? Can I just let go a little bit more? So that was like the first letting go. The second letting go was this one. I was standing and looking at this canvas for a long time, and then I started seeing these shapes. So I was like, okay, I'll take charcoal and I'll, like, outline the shapes. And then from the shapes, I started to paint in this oak bark tan, and the oak bark tan was really tedious. So I started pouring because I was just like, I just didn't want to get this done. And when I started to pour, it was like, boom, that's beautiful. Okay. And that led to this next series where I was like, can I do a Helen Frankenthaler? I'm just going to coat the entire canvas with linseed oil, then bring pigment. But when I started to coat the canvas with linseed oil, just the movement, the pouring of the linseed oil on the floor, which was just fantastically liberating. And then what popped out was like, I just got to stop. It's beautiful. It's perfect. So there's also oak bark tan added to that, making neat configurations, and then soil pigments as well. So where's my art going? My art is going in the direction of trying to listen more to the ecosystem so that it can have more agency. So I've been burying more tinted canvases in a spring that I've been giving offerings to every full moon and new moon since 2018. It's pretty powerful, but there's also, I need to lean into more how to work with this. Also growing my own pigment plants. I love gardening. I feel like communicating with plants and growing food is just a beautiful process. So to be able to bring the artistic practice of growing in there for madder root, which makes alizarin crimson, pretty excited about that. And then for this summer, exploring land art potentials for the Southern Appalachians, like what is possible here. And it's really hard to think outside of my own box when I don't know what my box is. So I'm thinking I'm going to be making a periodic table of land art elements. So I'm going to be thinking of like, okay, what do we have here? We've got wind, we've got rain. I'm going to start kind of like compiling, what do we have here? And then what are the artists that have worked with wind? So the Aeolian harps, the Aeolian flutes, like what are the artists that have worked with lightning? And so, those are the things that I know, but there's going to be parts where it's looking up what artists have worked with these elements, as well as restoration with Mel Chin, decomposition and ephemeral art, but trying to just figure out what are the elements here, and then creating small scale sculptures as experiments. The Bascom's given me an opportunity to do that on their 5-acre forested campus. So that's what's going forward. I just want to name that living during this time is a huge honor for us as artists, because we're getting to light up and help by us remembering how to be human, because I think we're just as artists, we're doing that. We're listening, we're experimenting, we're playing, we're like breaking rules like this, that's human right there. And that's a powerful beingness to bring into the world during this time. So yeah, I want to say thank you to everyone. Deep thank you. And I could go and list, but I feel like I'm going over time. So well, thanks everybody.
Does anyone have any questions for Stash?
Elijah.
So talk about the work that's specifically about DACA. You mentioned how you can bring out care and kindness within a human society. How do you reconcile that with, I see personally nature as it has very violent elements. So you mentioned lightning, you talked about hurricane Helene. So how do you, I guess, where does care and kindness come out within nature?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think the care and kindness comes in our response to it. Do we think of like a lightning bolt as something that's coming down to punish us? Or do we think of it as like, wow, okay, how are we going to respond to this and take care of the people around us and respond to the forest? And how do we respond to this event with care? I think that's a good question, Elijah. It's a really good question.
When are you planning to like have a workshop where you teach us how to like make these pigments?
Yeah.
And like that you have a garden for it. I was just asking for a friend. Seeing like all the jars, like the process, like that's so cool. And you clearly have a knowledge of it. So are you comfortable sharing it and teaching it?
I'm almost there, like maybe in a year. I'll let you know. I'd love to do that. Okay, so Ron?
Yeah, I noticed that shift where you were, and this is some of the language comes from the review sheet, which I liked, about having references meaningfully embedded instead of illustrated, and I think that there was a shift from where you were illustrating nature, in a way with your paintings, that then you shifted instead of illustrating to demonstrate. So I think that is kind of a reasonable word to use, with process. So the process seemed to take over a bit more, at least recently. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, it has been a significant shift. And I think that's what I was seeking. And I didn't know what it was that I needed to do. Because it is really hard to go from a very cognitive way of thinking about the world, and thinking that my imagination is a sensory organ to, can I just take even my imagination out and just let my body feel with the materials? Can I just let the materials speak? So that process of change has been something I'm still leaning into. And it's really hard for me to let my brain go out. So by focusing though on the processing of the materials, that gives my cognition something to be working with while I can be experimenting. So it's the experimentation. The next thing I want to lean into is making paper so that I have I don't know, there's something about preciousness of materials that's coming up for me right now that's hindering the experimentation. So I need to somehow that's the next thing that I need to break through, of not having a preciousness of materials, of inviting a huge number of mistakes, and mistakes that will potentially ruin materials. I'm still in the trajectory, but I feel like with these new paintings, I'm finally touching it. I've got like the touchstones to be able to remember, like, that's what that feels like. And what it feels like in my body is so different. When I was doing like the drawing of the trees, it was still separating from the cognitive ideas, and it was exciting, and I'm up there. But when I was doing the pouring, that was like my body felt like there's something else going on that felt like a deep meditative state, not of a focused meditation where you're like focusing on something, but it's that space where time kind of stops. So yeah, I know what it feels like now. Yeah, if I can just, yeah, the process is underway. And I really appreciate your help. Ron has been the one that's been like, Stosh, let go, pour, just you're all about color, materials, let it happen. Yeah, thank you, Ron. Any other questions? Yeah.
Incorporating sound into any of your pieces, like creating, like outside, if you create like something that the wind could blow across on being each other.
Yes. That's my big dream, is to figure out how to make Aeolian flutes, and what those would be like. So yeah, you like hit it right on the nose. Yeah. Oh, you can help with that?
I can show you after this. I taught a workshop on how to make operators and flutes sound.
Okay, yeah, let's talk. Amazing. Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much.